To know about the ARC. Last week marked my 48th year. I really am that old. I think Carolyn Knight and I started about the same time. And this is Carolyn Knight, the director of the Ohio Department, almost gave you a promotion, the Developmental Disabilities Council. And thank you for coming. Also wanted to introduce Peter Moore. Pete is back in the back. Pete's the director of the Ohio Provider Resource Association. And we're glad to have both of them here today.
I want to give a shout out to Joni Denny too, who's on the ARC of Ohio board. Secretary for life. All right.
So welcome. We're glad you're here. You're going to learn as much from the people around you as you are from the people up here. So interact. Mark's going to be helping us with the microphone. We encourage you throughout the day to ask questions and interact. Some of this stuff can be really dry, and we don't want it to be dry, so talk to us, ask questions, interact.
The PowerPoint is just to keep Gary and I on track, to be honest. We're just trying to throw something up there.
Yeah, those of you who know me kind of like line Gary up, and maybe at 5 o'clock he'll be done talking. So.
Hey, you ready?
Yep. Yeah. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about our advocacy efforts. We are primarily an advocate. We do individual advocacy and systems advocacy. Individual advocacy is if you call any one of us or any one of our thousands of family members and you need help, we'll try to help you. My philosophy as the CEO of the organization is if you think you're one of ours, you probably are. We are not an organization for advocacy that does a formal intake. We should be documenting more for statisticians, but we don't. Honestly, I don't. They do. They're much better than I. But if you need help, if you know someone that needs help, let us know. We've been around since 1950. And we were founded by individuals and family members who wanted more than what existed in 1950. And if you think about what Ohio was like, what the country was like in 1950, if you had a child with a disability, you typically lived on a farm. Even if you lived in a city, you lived near your family. But if you had a child with a disability in 1950 or 1960 or even in 1970, the school district could actually say, I'm sorry, we can't educate your child, take them home. The only option at that time, until actually 1967, was a large facility that was out of home. The ARC was instrumental in the establishment of special education. We actually sued and then helped write the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The ARC was there to create the county boards and help.
County board started out of schools, right?
Right, and the county boards started at schools. Any of you old enough to know who Roy Rogers and Dale Evans is? Oh, thank God.
He's only saying that because we tell him he has to update his references.
I do.
Stories.
So prior to the 1950s, if you had a child with a disability, the rest of the world kind of thought you had done something wrong and you were being punished, or your child was being punished. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans were Hollywood cowboy stars. They happened to have a little girl named Robin who was born with Down syndrome. She sadly passed away, but when she died, Dale Evans wrote a book called Angel Unaware, and she changed the entire thought process. She said, and the ARC said, if you were given a child with a disability, oh, geez.
I knew you were going to break down. So the philosophy was they kind of turned the thinking upside down on its head. So you were actually blessed and entrusted when you had a child with a disability. That's the whole thought.
And if you find a copy of that book, you'll see in the beginning all proceeds will benefit a new organization called the ARC. So that's how we started. We were also the organization that said, this was pre-Pride Month, that, yeah, I've got a kid with a disability. He happens to have blue eyes too and brown hair, so what? We were the organization where moms in the 50s and 60s literally knocked on doors and said, do you have a child with a disability? I do, it's okay. And they organized and they changed the world. So that's us, that's us.
And that's you guys. The family started the whole ARC organization, that whole movement.
So when I go into a meeting, when Dave goes into a meeting, it's usually it always is on the shoulders of those parents and people with disabilities. So if you've heard, there's that Gary, that son of a bitch coming in, I get that occasionally. I do tend to walk in with a chip on my shoulder because I've typically spent at least the last hour talking to someone on the phone, or those of you who know me through Facebook, interacting in the evening with Facebook friends. So that's me. That's the ARC. Dave comes from the real world. I grew up with a cousin with cerebral palsy. My wife has an uncle and a cousin with Down syndrome. My wife's laptop broke. I got online to find someone to fix my laptop, and I found a guy that lived a mile from me that was really good at fixing laptops. So he came and he fixed my laptop, and he was good. So like any director of a charity, he was good and cheap. So we've got some computers in the office. He came into the office and spent a day fixing our computers. At the time, we had wires hanging from the ceiling. He's a little OCD.
Maybe, a little bit.
And at the end of the day, he said, if you ever have anything, I've just listened to what you do all day. So
Yeah, for me, I was in the for-profit world. I really didn't know this, an organization like the ARC or the county boards or OPERA. I didn't know they existed. So when you find people that are doing really good work, I mean, you want to help. So I left the for-profit world and haven't looked back.
So when you think of the ARC, we're the grandparents, the organization of the grandparents of the disability movement. We're the civil rights arm of the disability movement. And we've got that son of a bitch who's a CEO that will come to a meeting and, raise hell when we need to.
I usually do these in a church too, so he's always like,
Yeah, it's so nice to be able to do it in a casino. I mean,
Yeah.
we exist.
Yeah.
So,
all right, so
So
we
we're
should
gonna-
probably get started.
we should get started. So what we want to do today is talk about all the changes in the waivers. Those of you who do not have a waiver, are interested in more services, please contact us later. There's a whole new process of how to get services and be on the waiting list. But call us anytime. Our information's on the tables out there.
Okay, so I'll jump in here
Yes.
before you get on roll. There are currently 3 what we call developmental disabilities waivers in our system. That's the level 1, the self, and the IO, individual options waivers. Okay, so with all those 3 waivers, there is a new service that is now available called self-directed transportation.
So keep in mind, we're in the midst, or hopefully at the end of the COVID pandemic. A number of years ago, the major provider of transportation to developmental disability services were our county boards of developmental disabilities. CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, on a federal level, said it's a conflict of interest for you county boards to fund, case manage, and provide the same services. Therefore, if you want to continue to receive Medicaid dollars, waiver dollars, you've got to get out of the business of providing direct services. And then the pandemic hit. We privatized most of the transportation services to get you to and from adult day programs. The pandemic hit, and if you remember, the day programs for the most part had to shut down. When you shut down, those of you who are independent providers and agency providers know, if you're not providing the services, you don't get paid. And we had all of these brand new transportation providers who had just bought or leased all of these vehicles. And they couldn't bill because they couldn't provide the services, and they began to close. But at the same time, we have been promoting for years people with disabilities getting real jobs in real places. And our system had been created to, I'm gonna pick you up at 8, and I'm gonna bring you back at 3, I'll pick you up at 9, and bring you back at 2, but I'll work at Burger King. And my shift doesn't start until 6 p.m., and it only goes till 9. How am I gonna get there and back? How are we gonna do that? So we all got together, and when we talk about it all, that's the advocates, the providers, the county boards, and the Department of Developmental Disabilities. How are we gonna figure this out?
I don't want to leave out the council because I'm looking at Carolyn.
Yes.
They're very involved
Yes.
in some of those initiatives too, from federal money coming in and trying to create new and better services.
So at the same, and things happened all at the same time. We've got the pandemic. We have a new director, Jeff Davis, who agreed that we need to simplify things. And we need to make things self-directed. Me, the person with a disability, my family, need to decide how I'm gonna get to work. So each of the waivers, as of July 1, has a new service, a new billing code called self-directed transportation. So what is that?
Make sure we talk about the other two transportation services are still available too. Non-medical transportation, and now they just call it transportation, but we all know it as HPC transportation.
So it can, self-directed transportation could be a number of things. It could be Uber, it could be Lyft, it could be the city bus, or it could be my neighbor or my friend or my family member that's willing to transport my loved one to and from wherever they need to go. So if it's an Uber, you've all gone to maybe a Giant Eagle or a Kroger and seen an Uber gift card, your waiver can now pay for an Uber gift card. You're going to have to explain that to the team. It's the same as any other service. It's going to have to be authorized, and payment for that gift card is going to come from
I got it on the screen even for us. So GT Independence. You guys, some of you probably remember Morning Sun was the fiscal intermediary on the self-waiver. They were replaced by a company called GT Independence out of Michigan, I believe.
It's a brand new service, so keep in mind that your SSA is still learning how to authorize. The Ohio Association of County Boards did a video for SSAs. I posted it on our Facebook page, but we can provide it for you if you've not seen it on how it can be authorized and billed. There are challenges with this in that the system is going to be trusting that the Uber driver is going to get there and back, okay. And you as a family member are going to have trust in Uber or Lyft in the city bus.
It's a scary concept for a lot of families, right? I mean, it's that, we talk about it often in the advocacy world, dignity of risk, right? So, you know, why should I try to limit someone from having the same abilities that you and I have, right? So, but parents often say that's scary for me to put my loved one into an Uber car.
So if I've got a job at Burger King, chances are I can get on Uber and I can go to Burger King and I'm gonna be fine.
But I think the way the rule's written too is the HPC staff can actually travel with them.
So you can get both services at the same time.
Right.
So we're still investigating about shared living. Could I use that additional HPC provider? Yeah, go ahead.
Can the HPC provider actually provide the transportation?
We're still investigating that. She asked, could the HPC provider also provide the transportation? I would think, but we're still looking at a lot of that stuff. Yeah,
Would you, I'm just thinking that through in my head as you ask that question, wouldn't you want to then just be the HPC transportation service authorizing the plan? Instead of the,
My personal situation, we have a parent.
Mark, could you get a mic over here for her? Thank you.
closest ones there?
Yeah, he'll bring it over to you.
Doesn't HPC already provide
Yeah.
transportation?
So there is, and that would be
Yeah.
the easiest, there is a billing code called HPC Transportation, and it would probably be easier for you, because you're not gonna have to go through GT Independence.
There's,
What does
He's
self?
right here, he's right here.
I'm gonna let her ask her question here, then
We're, for our daytime hours, we're using HPC through Boundless, through an agency, and through the
Okay.
parent-directed program.
Yeah.
They don't reimburse for mileage, which is a huge burden on the
Mm.
provider. And so I'm wondering if we can, and I don't know if other people are using parent-directed, but I'm wondering if we could use
It
this.
it depends on the agency. Some agencies don't allow you to use other providers. That's an agency decision. So some agencies will say, if you're choosing me as your provider, you've chosen me to provide everything. Most agencies don't do that. Most agencies will say, oh yeah, choose me for HPC, choose the independent for this. It's up, so one of the things that we're gonna have to do as family members is really ask a lot of questions of the agencies we choose and of the independents. What are you willing to do? I would think you could use self-directed transportation and your parent-directed. Boundless is the only one that calls it, what is it,
PDP, parent directed, yeah.
Yeah, I would think, but you'd have to check with Boundless and see if they're willing to do that. Okay, yes?
Yeah. That's really confusing, isn't it? That's,
Okay,
that's why.
okay. Can we get a mic over here, please? No, you do. I can't hear you over here, so they can't hear you over there.
Because I'm fired up.
Okay,
So, anyway. So I used to service 175 individuals in one county.
okay,
2019, I dissolved a lot of that, but I still provide 150 individuals.
okay.
So, these new self-directed transportation, and I love it.
I'm just watching to see if we get any
I
comments.
think it's a great opportunity, but
I don't care.
it's a slap in the face to us providers that are currently providing non-medical transportation, because you're gonna pay Uber more money than you're paying us for a trip. And I get it, I
Right.
understand.
And
I-
when you say you, I know you're not talking about me.
I know.
You're talking about the system.
State of Ohio, the
Right.
system. And I get it, I understand that. But we would have more providers if the state was willing to increase the
Right.
rate
Absolutely.
for us to provide the transportation. And I provide 100 trips a week. 40 of those trips are
Just move my
nights
stuff
and
if you need to.
Right.
If someone-
So can I interrupt? We're not replacing non-medical. So I need to explain to you, because you're right, on the rate system, if I'm a non-medical transportation provider, or on what many of us call homemaker personal care transportation, the rate is the rate is the rate. Uber, Lyft, and the bus charge what's called usual and customary. So whatever Uber charges is what the state will pay. And it is more.
Right.
It is more.
But the problem is, and the government is not thinking of
Right.
it, so we're back into the same situation we were before,
Do you have one of
which
those?
is why it started with transportation. If someone's using Uber and they're working 5 days a week, unless you're gonna change the funding cap, what's gonna happen at the end of their span when they have 4 months left in their span and they're out of transportation money?
Right.
Who's gonna pay for that?
Well, what we found, if you have a level 1 waiver, most people on the level 1 waiver used only half the money that was allocated. So we totally agree with you. The state has contracted, or is in the process of contracting with a company to look at all of the rates and all of the funding. So understand too where money comes from with Medicaid. Medicaid is a federal program, and on a normal day, the federal government pays 60% of the cost of anything in Medicaid or waivers, and the county, for the most part, pays 40%. Because of the pandemic, it's now 30% of Medicaid and waivers is paid by your county, and 70% by the federal government. As soon as the pandemic is over, it will go back to 60-40. I always tell people, follow the money. Understand why things are happening. We're gonna talk a little bit about the budget at the end of this presentation. We're gonna need your help with the legislature to put in more money, because the counties often are at their max that they can provide, and we need the state legislature to put in more money so that we can raise all the rates.
Right, and that's one big thing we do all the time too, is why we want new options available for people and their families. We still spend a tremendous amount of time with the system partners too, advocating for rate. The rate is the rate right now. We're fighting for a pretty big increase.
Yes, ma'am.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for unraveling or unbundling or whatever you call it, the level 1 waiver.
Okay.
So kudos to that. And as far as the Uber, my question is, if you're an HBC provider and you're riding in Uber, Lyft, or whatever, how do they account for you riding with that person? I know they charge per person. So how do you as a provider, if you're able to ride with that person,
It's whatever that gift card says.
so that gift card pays for you and
Right,
your-
yes,
Oh.
yes.
Okay.
So the other part, and the neat part that I like, is I can hire my neighbor or my family member, and I can negotiate the rates. So some of this is a step-by-step process. We open the door to allow other rates, and that gets the state used to it. There is a cap of $12.50 per trip for my neighbor. But often, I'm gonna be working like anyone else, pretty close to my house. So if I can throw my neighbor $12.50 each way, they might be willing to do that. But my neighbor's gonna have to have a criminal background check. And my neighbor would have to be paid through GT Independence, not as a provider. My neighbor's not gonna be a certified provider, but they'll be an independent contractor.
And how do they bill for that? I mean, how do they do that? How do they get paid?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. The SSA has to authorize the neighbor. There's a form that they'll have to fill out with GT Independence. It'll have to be authorized, and your neighbor won't get paid like you get paid as an independent. GT Independence will send them a check. And transportation is reimbursement, so it's not a taxable. That makes sense? We're still trying to figure it out. Yes, ma'am.
Before my retirement, I worked for RTC in Bethel, and I was in charge of transportation. And we did exactly what should be done, which is we looked at when our folks needed to get to work, and we extended the hours from 8 to 5 to 6 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. at night. That allowed anybody that wasn't working in the real world to be able to get back and forth. Originally we had weekends as well, but we found that it was just not doable because there were too few people working weekends. And when they were, quite often they would then get picked up, they'd scheduled transportation but would get picked up by families. So to me, that should kind of be like a model. They then subsumed what we were doing under their public transportation system. It still works, but not quite as well, but the hours stayed the same. I live in Champaign County, and we have absolutely nothing. No Uber, no Lyft. CTS operates from 8:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, which is not good for anybody. So a lot of the providers are doing the transportation. Recently, I took my son and 2 of his friends to the fair. We needed room for 2 wheelchairs and 6 adults. So I hauled out one of my old, big old vans and took them. But that kind of made me realize that there was a problem here because, you know, how are you going to transport the wheelchairs and all that kind of stuff? I eventually bought a van for the house. Now we got to figure out how to do the finances. So maybe this will help us a little bit here with,
Yeah,
you
so
know,
we just
what-
wanted to create another way, another option. This
Right,
doesn't
it's just an
replace
additional.
anything that we've had, but understand, if half the transportation providers don't exist anymore, and I still need to get to Burger King for my job, I needed something else. So, we wanted to simplify the waivers, make them more inclusive, allow me to use my waiver dollars in the general community. Yes?
Like,
Right.
you know, transportation, you name it. And so this is sort of new, and the self-directed transportation, he would mostly use it for entertainment. And he had his ISP on Tuesday, and for a personal reason, we had a different SSA doing it. And when I brought it up to him, it seemed like he wasn't aware of it or didn't know how to approach it. So can you tell us like how to do it step by step? Because I'm really confused about this.
So we're hearing that often, and we're hearing that from the County Board Association in general. I can send, if you email me, I can send you the 2-hour presentation training that SSAs were supposed to receive.
I think the disconnect right now is they're still trying to get some answers out of GT Independence and how it really kind of works. But we'll help you out. Email us and we'll.
Right. So one of the challenges, and there are going to be challenges, is Uber has something called Uber Eats. And the Prader-Willi Association has contacted us. Prader-Willi is a syndrome where I eat uncontrollably sometimes. And if I've got an Uber gift card and I can order Uber Eats to deliver 6 pizzas to my house, that becomes a challenge. So we're going to put that back on the team to decide whether I'm able to self-direct when it comes to transportation. Because I've not really ordered transportation, I've ordered 6 pizzas.
Well,
So
that's
we've
the-
got to figure that out.
I mean, that's the big piece about a self-waiver. You gotta remember, the person himself or someone in their life has to help them at least self-direct one service in that waiver.
Go
So
ahead.
is this already in effect?
In effect as of July 1.
July 1.
Okay.
Yeah, all of this is July 1, excuse me.
I
Yes.
just have a really brief question, and I know
Sure.
you guys are saying that you're still trying to work through the process. But when I heard that the neighbor needed to have a background check versus Uber,
Right.
Lyft, if they're riding single, how is this gonna work with GT Independence? Are they allocating or just picking a specific?
No, you pick the provider.
Yeah, you pick the
You
neighbor.
pick the provider, and it's in your ISP. So when you have a team meeting, you have to say, Dave lives next door to me, Dave's willing to provide transportation for my loved one, and he's done all the requirements that GT Independence is saying.
But what if that individual, what if they don't have anyone? So it's just a Uber driver themselves? or
Then
Lyft
you,
driver?
well, see, that's the challenge with self-directed services. The old-fashioned services where you pick from certified providers, the state of Ohio is assuring that these independents and agencies have background checks, CPR first aid, they meet all the requirements. If I, as a parent, chose my neighbor, that burden goes back onto me. You know, it's like, they have to have a criminal background check, that was negotiated, but that's part of self-direction
Yes.
and living in the real world. I'm gonna trust my neighbor. That's, yeah.
I mean, it's scary for me.
If that concerns you and you're worried about that, I would choose traditional transportation
Yeah.
services.
It's not like you
I'm
can't pick the
I'm
other.
a provider for NLT. myself, but I'm
Okay.
just wondering, because I heard that question.
Right.
And even if they're their own guardian, you know,
Right.
families have wonders, they think.
Oh,
even
absolutely.
myself, I would think, you know, versus a Uber or Lyft driver, but it was just a question.
Right.
And then, when you're saying that these funds will be, coming from Medicaid, and I just want everybody to understand, because I will get these questions if we provide HPC,
Right.
transportation and all of that. But these funds for the GTC independents, are they gonna be coming from the bucket of funds?
Right, they come from your waiver budget. GT Independence just pays the bill, but the money comes from your budget. Anyone
But
living
just
on-
be clear, GT Independence doesn't get paid from a person's waiver. So
Right. They
there's
have
no
a separate-
money going to them from the individual's waiver.
Anyone from Mahoning County, I grew up in Youngstown, near Youngstown. When I explained this to the parents in Youngstown, their buses change in downtown Youngstown. You don't sometimes want to be in downtown Youngstown, and that was a major concern for families in that county. It was like, yeah, he can ride a bus, but he's not changing buses in downtown Youngstown. Those are gonna have to be family decisions on what do I trust, who do I trust? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions.
That's all right.
Because I don't like to look for things when I.
And we're gonna be around, we're not
So
going
the
anywhere.
first question I have is, you mentioned, let's revisit this, you mentioned that we could email you.
Yes.
I'm not able to find your email on the paper you gave us. So if you could be so kind to just shout out your email address, so we can all have it.
Are you ready? All right. Gary dot Tonks, Tonks, at the ARC, A-R-C, of Ohio.org. And mine is David dot Lewis, Lewis. Same Indian.
Okay.
Okay.
Another question.
Yes,
So when you said that this is coming from their, waiver,
right.
my understanding in the beginning was that it was a separate pool of money that was for $2,500. That was in addition to the waiver.
No, we're gonna talk about the 2,500 right now. But no, it's all within the same budget, there's no new money.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, is that another, yeah?
In high in cities, I know that really common in our county, but my brother takes Uber Black. Because they are background checks, CPR certified, all of that stuff. Would that be an option for people
Yes.
that do have Uber?
Absolutely. I just named Uber and Lyft as examples,
Yep.
but it's any company that is not a certified transportation provider.
Uber Black is part of Uber. It's one of the choices that you can choose
Oh, okay.
when
Yes.
you're ordering a ride. They're
Right.
more expensive, but they're a
Right,
lot more
and when I said
reliable.
certified, I meant DD certified, yeah.
Yep.
So you have to be a company that provides transportation or that neighbor or friend or family member. And then you're gonna have to do what you do with agency providers, you check them out. There are many Ubers that don't have Lyft vehicles. You've gotta check that out in advance.
How often are the gift cards issued? Are they
Okay.
issued like once per plan, and they just get a $2,500 gift card?
So she's asking how often would I get a gift card? Is it monthly, quarterly, annually? It's gonna depend on your team and your county. It's the same as those of you who are independents and you're authorized. Some counties will authorize you for a whole year, some will only do it for a month. It just depends on your team and your county. I would think because it's a brand new service, I doubt any county is gonna just give you a $2,500 Uber gift card.
Right.
Yeah, I
wonder how
just,
they did that. Is it something that the client's gonna have to go every month and request a new gift card, or will they do like $250 a month every month on the first?
it depends on your SSA.
Yeah, I think that's part of the discussion on the team. They gotta sit down and like, okay, maybe the first month they'll just say, here's this, and then once you if you're doing repetitive trips for jobs or whatever,
Yeah.
then they might say, okay, we feel like this is working, right? And then we'll authorize for more.
Counties have to do a projection
Yeah,
tool
CPT.
of expenses, and they also don't want you to run out of money.
Right, I'm just wondering how that works for the person who wants to be able to, go to the mall at will, and if they exhaust that fund before that 30 days is up, what's the process for getting more? Just what is it, what do the logistics look like?
It's gonna depend on your team and your process locally. Yes,
I mean, that's,
Hi, my name is Amy. Now, would this be for regular recreation, like going to the movies? Okay, which is a great idea, because I was in a meeting a couple years ago, and what they were talking about, the fact that people with disabilities, they wanna be able to go out and do the same things that everyone else do. If it's going to a nightclub, that's what they wanna do, and they wanna come back at 12 midnight. How many independent providers are up at 12 midnight transporting people?
Yeah.
So it's a great idea as long as everybody's capable. When you look at safety, that's a big concern. And of course, as you say, they will get with the team and identify the people that are gonna be responsible for their safety. So any and everybody's not gonna get a car.
Yeah, keep in mind, these are home and community-based waivers. So it's getting out of the community. We worked for decades with the DD Council to do surveys. Transportation is at the top of everyone's concerns over and over again. Remember in the late 90s doing these surveys, and some of the traditional, not necessarily DD providers, but the transportation providers that I would get with my Medicaid card, my doctor's appointment is at 9 and you show up at my house at 10. I mean, that just doesn't fly.
so again, guys, remember, it's just another way of adding a new service to create, what we're trying to do is create flexibilities in the system. The long-term goal was maybe we eventually get to 2 waivers and 1 waiver, but that's down the road.
Yeah, let's take 2 more, then we gotta move on.
Hi, first I want to thank you because I'm a baby and I know nothing about what you're talking about. I just became my daughter's provider.
Okay.
And so I'm clueless. But she is medically fragile, so 3 kidney transplants and colon cancer. And I just retired to take care of her. So when I have to drive, and you might not know this, probably you don't know this, but I have to drive like to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and I have to drive to the Cleveland Clinic. Would those be all kinds of possibilities that I could use transportation for?
Yeah, are you a certified provider?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be homemaker personal care transportation, and you would get a mileage rate. What
Okay.
your team has to authorize.
I don't even know who my team is. Do I have a team?
Do you have a
SSA?
Yeah.
The
I'm
team-
sorry, I don't
We're
know.
good.
You're not asking anything that we all haven't gone through.
Okay, because you keep saying a team meeting, I'm like, who's my team?
So you're supposed to be your SSA, you and
Okay.
your child, get together.
Well, I called her last week about being a shared living provider, because
Okay.
I thought that was more appropriate, but I
Okay.
haven't heard back from her yet, so.
Give me a call or an email.
Okay.
Sometimes a well-placed phone call.
I just
from
need
our
help, so thank you for
Yes,
being here.
please, anytime. Yeah.
This is just my opinion, and it's great. It's great that they have this service for individuals who are more capable to get out and do transportation on their own. But for those, the vast majority of the people who are in the DD system are not. They have guardians, they need to be watched and taken care of. And my idea is that they really, really need to take care of the transportation rates for family members and individuals.
Amen. Yep.
So my question was, could this option be used with a regular agency provider for those kind of special trips that an independent provider doesn't want to take because of the way that the billing rates are? Like, for example, that I give is that client that wants to go 180 miles away to camp, and there's no one that can take them but the independent provider. The problem is it's a 4-hour trip, and the drive after she drops them off at camp home for 4 hours, and that 180 miles is not.
Yes, it is covered. It is
Yes,
covered.
it is covered.
It is covered.
Okay,
And
so
as you were
that's
told,
my-
so a lot of times if things don't make sense, they're not real or true. So we just asked the department this summer, because a lot of people were transported to camp. The Department of DD has said, yes, the trip back, even without the individual, is covered.
So what are the, because that, I figured there has to be a way, is it billable just the miles, is it billable the HPC hours, and what are the circumstances in which we can say?
Yeah, give us a call. Homing or personal care providers can do services on behalf of.
Yes, but what is the, I can't bill my ride home from my house or my client,
No.
20 miles.
No.
What is there any?
If you're doing something on behalf of the person you're serving, it's billable if it's authorized in advance. But no one gets paid to go to work.
Right.
So you gotta separate that. But much of this is negotiated. Those of you who have been through the school system, everything is negotiated. The difference is, in education, I have a right to a free and appropriate public education. That right doesn't exist in the adult world. What exists is what I can negotiate. And they can't deny without cause. And we have rules and regulations to back it up, but there's a major difference when you cross over from the school system to the adult world.
I'm thinking about the transportation part, and, if you choose, family member or a neighbor, and you talked about, talking with your team, SSAs, as well as this GT independent, and that the person must be hired and paid for. So are we talking about, we haven't used the term certified or eligible, but I'm guessing, am I right or wrong, that there's this whole process with the county board, and then another whole process with GT independents, just to be able to.
Yeah. So my neighbor does not have to be certified. If it's a homemaker personal care provider, they do have to be certified.
Right.
So my neighbor is not being paid to provide assistance to me. They're just being paid like a taxi driver would be paid. They're not providing assistance. But if your loved one needed you to have someone in the car with them, you could do both at the same time. Okay? And it's brand new, so it's complicated, and we haven't sorted it out. Anytime we try to simplify anything, we kind of make it more complicated before it gets simple. So let's move on. So the ARC's position on the 3 waivers for the last 25 years has been, we need 1 waiver and a valid instrument to determine my funding range within that waiver. That hasn't happened for 25 years, but 2 years ago, the John Martin administration agreed to 2 waivers. Okay? And then Jeff Davis's administration said, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll have 2 waivers. We'll combine the level 1 and the self. Everyone thought that was a great idea. The county boards loved it. The SSAs wouldn't have as much. What do I do? How do I do it? And then the Department of Medicaid, who oversees all waivers, said, whoa, we just ran into a pandemic and we're overburdened with all this other stuff. What we will allow you to do is to make the level 1 and the self waivers so similar that sometime in the future we'll combine them. So what we're going to talk to you about today is changes we have made in the level 1 and the self so that sometime in the future we can merge them together. All right? The first thing we did was agree, I'm going to jump a little bit around. So, one of the, level 1 on the funding. So one of the major challenges with the level 1 waiver, originally, we were going to have a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. Didn't happen. But one of the major challenges with the level 1 waiver is that prior to July 1, the level 1 waiver had 4 separate budgets. There was a budget for what I got at home and in the community of $6,000 something. There was a budget for what I did during the day if I was an adult. And then there was a budget for assistive technology and home modifications. And then there was yet another budget for emergencies. And most of our families didn't know there were 4 budgets.
Hang on a second, Gary. Is
Yeah.
there a Teresa Green in the room?
They didn't know there were 4 budgets, and if you remember what I said earlier, most people on the level 1 waiver only spent half of their budget. Well, they didn't know they had 4 budgets, so they couldn't spend it all because they didn't know. In an effort to simplify the level 1 waiver, an agreement was reached that on July 1, or the beginning of a waiver span, but because of the pandemic, it's essentially July 1, everyone on the level 1 waiver now has 1 budget. If I'm a child still in school, I have a $30,000 annual budget. There's no emergency budget anymore. There's no separate budget for assistive tech. I've got 1 budget. So what's it mean, a child still in school? Those of you who have gone through special ed know that you have a right to an education until your 22nd birthday, but you're not going to be forced to stay till 22. If I'm 18 and I leave, or if I'm 19 and I leave school, I'm an adult. If I'm still in school at 21, I'm a child. So we're using those. If I'm a child still in school, I have an annual budget of $30,000. If I'm an adult out of school, I now have an annual budget of $45,000. So all of you that are on the self or the level 1 waiver and thinking, I need an IO, well, $45,000 is about the budget you're going to have if you were on an IO waiver. Does that make sense? All right, so you've got 1 budget now on the level 1 waiver, which is the same budget you have on the self. $30,000 if I'm a child in school, $45,000 if I'm an adult out of school. And we've moved, we made a promise to each other we were not going to eliminate any services. So there was a fear originally. I really like this service, you're going to eliminate it. We didn't do that. We've made the budgets and the waivers so similar that Medicaid can say in a couple of years, okay, let's combine it. Let's combine it.
Okay, so we got the 5 services added to the level 1 waiver.
Okay.
Okay.
So historically, you may remember the self-waiver, please jump in because this may get confusing. The self-waiver started as the autism waiver. Governor Strickland promised the autism community that he would allow a waiver to be created to serve that community. And frankly, the ARC said, what about kids with Down syndrome and cerebral palsy? And so it never became the autism waiver, but it has services in that specific for kids and adults with autism. The first is functional behavioral assessment. I need someone to write an ABA plan. But I may just need someone to write a behavior plan and do an assessment. Okay? Right now, David served on the behavior support committee that just created the behavior rule. Many of the parents that were on this group said, my child's got significant behaviors. What are the qualifications of the person writing the behavior plan? There weren't any. It was whomever could write the behavior plan wrote the behavior plan. And this service, even though it was in the self, was not being used. The rates were too low, and the requirements to become a provider were too high. Those have been modified. We haven't gotten in the IO waiver yet, but if you have a level 1 or a self waiver, you in that team meeting can identify someone to do an assessment. Not the social worker who has a bachelor's in social work, or the guy that has a bachelor's in accounting that kind of slipped in and is doing a good job but doesn't know anything about behavior therapy, to write the behavior plan. It doesn't have to do an assessment and to write a behavior plan. It doesn't have to be for ABA. It can be for behavior. So those of you who are independents that are really advocating as well, you're dealing with someone that has behavioral issues and they have either a level 1 or a self waiver, and they want to use part of their budget for this. Someone in Cleveland could do an assessment and write a behavior plan.
It's 1 assessment per 12 months, up to $1,500.
The clinical therapeutic intervention is then someone to come in and train your staff to implement the behavior plan, okay? It's not someone who just happens to work for the county or the provider. So Kara, our regional director, is, I want to say ABA therapist. Okay, so she's our autism guru in the art that we can go to. But it's finally a professional that's trained. We modified the rates, modified the criteria.
I think that's important, because the rates for providers of that service have been increased. So that's one of the complaints we heard over the years. So there should be a higher rate for CTS.
I'm going to skip over participant-directed visit services because that's going to take a greater discussion. Participant family stability assistance has always been in the self waiver. 2 families have used it in the state. We've added it to the level 1 waiver. What that is my kid's got a disability, I kind of need some counseling because I'm dealing with lots of stress. Or my kid's got Prader-Willi, and there's a conference in Pittsburgh on Prader-Willi syndrome, and I need some way to pay for the conference, or autism, or family stability does not pay for transportation, or the hotel, or the food, but it will pay for the registration fee for the training.
Good, awesome.
For the family.
Yes.
We expect this one to be used more often. It's not mentioned, again, it does come from the waiver budget, but it's to stabilize the family and allow the family to be more actively participating. Any of you are said your natural support? This is to enforce and reinforce natural supports. I'm closer, so I'll come over here. Can you hear way over there?
No, is it income driven?
No. So remember, everyone on a waiver is Medicaid eligible. So one of the things we got the system to grasp was there are sections in some of these waiver rules that said this county must look at all other available income and assets. What we've got the state to openly admit that only applies to the person on the waiver, not the family. I could be living on Lane Avenue here in Columbus in a $2 million house, but if my 12-year-old is on a waiver, they can only look at my 12-year-old's income and assets. So once you're in the door and Medicaid eligible, they can't look at family income and assets.
Is the counseling that they provide for family stability, is that in-home, or is that just like the parent could seek counseling anywhere?
It's all negotiated. It's whatever you can present to your team once we figure out who your team is, and it has to be written in the ISP.
But there isn't like a family stability specialist?
No, that's what's neat about this. It's not a certified provider. It's
Whatever you need.
if I have to convince my team that it's necessary. So I had a dad say, does this include my case of beer I need to get through the week? No. And I have to tell you, when we get to participant-directed services, even though marijuana, for medical reasons, is legal in Ohio, we cannot use Medicaid or waivers to pay for marijuana because it's illegal on a federal level, and this is mostly federal money. Because we get that too. I know my child has epilepsy. The governor, my doctor wants him on prescription of marijuana. You can't use it to buy illegal substances on a federal level. Yes, sir.
So I know you've mentioned a couple times things to do with FAPE in school, and I know there's a little gray area, but like let's say a real rural school that doesn't have a BCBA or something, and the student wants to use, these FBA services. Are they allowed to do that for the purposes of training the people at the school that they work with?
Not technically, But if I'm using ABA therapy, it should be a wraparound wherever I go. If the staff as an advocate, I would say if the staff come to your house and you're training them in your house, outside the school building, waiver funds are supposed to pay for home in the community, not including school. It gets to be who's paying the bill. So school should pay for school, and Medicaid and waivers should pay for everything else. Having said that, if you've got a Medicaid card and you're still in school, we have a Medicaid in school program. Almost every school participates in it, and I bet you there's a way that the school could bill Medicaid for their service. It doesn't affect any other benefits that I get on Medicaid, and I say that because if I have an IEP and I'm on Medicaid, and my IEP says that I need speech therapy, Medicaid, if the school wants to, can be billed for speech therapy and the transportation to therapy on the day. So check on your Medicaid in school program. Mark Smith is the guy in charge over the Department of Education. If you go to the Department of Education and do a search for Medicaid in schools, they will list all the schools that participate in the Medicaid program. It's a voluntary effort, but it's not, for those of you who have kids still in school, it's something to keep in your back pocket. If the school is, they're not allowed to use a lack of funding as an excuse. It's used, but keep it in your back pocket. If your loved one has Medicaid, the Medicaid program can be billed for the therapies and transportation. Okay? And there's a listing of all the schools. Yes?
One tip on that, I live in a very rural school district, and the treasurer was the one, that's the person who reaches out and does that, so try to advocate directly to the treasurer,
Right.
because they're the one managing that.
Yeah, the only reason a school wouldn't do it is they don't have enough kids on Medicaid to make it administratively worthwhile. But most schools participate. If you live in a rural area or an urban, like Center City kind of school, chances are they accept Medicaid for the therapy. Yeah.
So all I'm hearing you say is that students who have disabilities identified in the schools that get an FBA done through the school district are also eligible to have an FBA done for community and home life through their waiver. Because when I get into situations with family where I advocate for them, the county boards say schools are responsible for FBAs because the kid's eligible for school services.
Right. You just have to prove at your team meeting that it's for home services. You know, and if you're a therapist, so we have a lot of teacher aides that are also homemaker personal care providers. We have special ed teachers who do both. You just have to you have to provide the service in the home and the community, not in the school. And if they get trained,
I just want your BCBA person's name. Because I'm a RBT, a registered behavior technician. So I just would like to chat with her sometime. And the other one quick thing, my daughter's on Medicaid, I'm new, Does the waiver help pay for anything like physical therapy and counseling? And
No.
that all comes out of her
that
insurance.
comes out of her Medicaid card.
Right.
Right.
Waiver's not involved.
Right, so don't forget, even if I have a waiver, if I have Medicaid, I'm still eligible for everything that Medicaid provides in addition to the waiver.
Waivers are payer of last resort.
Right. So if Medicaid will pay for it, the waiver won't. And some of you will get into this situation with your caseworkers that, well, we gotta get a denial over here, but before we can provide it over here, it's part of government.
Yes, our whole table over here kind of has a question.
Okay.
She's going to speak for us. We have a couple conferences and trainings coming up that our advocates would like to attend, Project STIR and Synergy, right? We know Project STIR has an option to be paid for from the self-waiver.
Right.
Our conferences like Synergy, are we able to do the same thing if prior authorization is made?
Mm-hmm.
What service is that actually under, so that we can go talk to our SSAs?
Participant directed goods services, a good lead-in.
Okay.
It's a good lead-in. So any of you that have loved ones that aren't on a waiver, is Amanda here from Community Fund? She's out, the table out there, Community Fund, which used to be called Community Fund Management Foundation, has a fund that can provide support to Synergy and other conferences as well. It's a private foundation that we in county boards work with. So let's go into participant-directed goods and services. The self-waiver has always had a billing code called participant-directed goods and services. I'm an adult, I have a $45,000 budget. I can use all of my budget if I'm on the self-waiver for participant-directed goods and services. And we'll explain what that is. If I'm on the level 1 waiver, I can use up to $2,500 of my budget for participant-directed goods and services. We're trying it out in the level 1, and then it'll move over to the IO once we test it out in the level 1. So what is this thing? In that move towards self-direction, the example I always use is, if you've ever been prescribed an exercise ball for physical therapy, they're hundreds of dollars. I might be able to go to Walmart and get it for $50. We were able to convince the government on an economic level, if I don't have to get it through a durable medical equipment provider or a specialized provider, I can get it less expensive, more generic, and I get to choose. Participant-directed goods and services encourages me to go off the menu and use generic services. The other example that I get all the time was, I've got a 16-year-old who's on a waiver, not IO yet, this is level 1 herself, and I want him to go to the Boy Scout camp. But the Boy Scout camp is not a certified provider. I can use this billing code to send my son to the Boy Scout camp and pay the usual and customary rate that all the other boys pay, and maybe I can send his homemaker personal care provider with him to help out, or I can negotiate. So the rule that's written but not written is, if I choose a provider meaning business of some sort or an independent, and their primary customer is people with disabilities, they've got to be certified. So if the ARC ran a camp, we'd have to be certified. You all are our primary customer. Boy Scouts just serve boys and girls now. They don't have to be certified. But again, the burden goes back on the family to, I trust the Boy Scouts, or I trust the YMCA, or I trust whatever setting is out there. It can be billed to participant-directed goods and services. And again, this company, GT Independence, will pay the bill. So if my son wants to go to the Boy Scout camp, I convince my team that that's the best alternative. You'll get an argument if your kid is 16. By the county board can say, well, parents pay for most 16-year-olds. How come you're not paying? You have to deal with that. It's a negotiated thing. But it's a service that's available. Or I want to go to a conference to get more training. Participant-directed goods and services. It goes on to be, my bathroom needs to become accessible, and I can't find a certified contractor. I can use participant-directed goods and services to hire a generic contractor that I trust to modify my bathroom. Okay? Now remember, when you do what we would used to call home modifications, if you're building a house, the waiver in Medicaid will not pay for that, just a toilet seat. But they will tear out the one you just put in and put in one that's accessible. Okay?
Strange.
It's strange, but they can also not modify the square footage of your house. So you want to convert your garage to a bedroom for your son that needs an accessible bedroom, they won't do that. That adds square footage to your house. Or you have a staircase and your only bathroom's on the second floor, You want to put a bathroom on the first floor, they're not going to do that. They'll spend money to put a lift in to take you up that might actually be more expensive than the alternative, but they won't change the format of your home with this funding. This will be experimented in the level 1 waiver. Right now, there's a $2,500 a year cap. Most families don't know it's there. We're here to kind of support you with that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Are the SSAs first and understand these new policies and procedures, or
No, they're not.
So
I know we have SSAs, and I don't want to out you, but
is this something that we're also going to have to work with the SSAs to teach them?
Yes.
Because that's where the fight comes in. It's okay,
Amen.
these are the
He's
things that
right.
we need on the ISP, these are the things that move the family forward, but it's a back and forth.
our SSAs are overworked and at the bottom of the totem. So it is not, I honestly believe it is not their fault. So it is up to us to sometimes educate them,
I do that.
call us.
I do too.
Sometimes it's better if we call, or we have a very close relationship with the Ohio Association of County Boards. And what typically happens is I'll get a call and I'll call the County Board Association and they'll call the county. Sometimes, give you the example that happened yesterday. I don't know if she's in the room, but I got an email from a mom saying, and she forwarded me her SSA statement, that this SSA said, waivers don't pay for technology. And I'm like, yeah, okay. If she could see me roll my eyes. So I sent that email off to the Deputy Director of Medicaid, her assistant, and the Policy Director of the Ohio Association of County Boards, whose immediate response was, oh my God.
Not
She
again.
called the SSA directly. Mom got an email immediately that said, oops, I made a mistake. We just don't pay for iPads. They pay, and it went back. I know this man that was the SSA was dedicated, committed, and he didn't know. It has gotten worse in the pandemic because I can't yell over the partition anymore. I'm working from my house. And the workforce crisis is also in the county board system. They don't know what they don't know, so.
It's really hard to be just direct and honest. It's hard for us to keep up with everything.
Right.
And I'm looking back there to Pete from Opera, and his rules change all the time, and we're always trying to keep up with all those changes. So yeah, as a system, we have to help educate everyone in our system.
And we can be the mediator. I joke, my official title is Gary Tonks CEO, sometimes it's Gary Tonks SOB. You know, I can do it either way. But, you know, lemonade works better than, you know, so I try to use lemonade, but don't always have to. Go ahead, please.
I'm in Franklin County, and this week I got my supportive technology letter.
Yes.
That we're talking about. Is this part of the $2,500?
Yes.
And we're talking about self-directed transportation, which would be a godsend for my son. Would it cover his cell phone in order to?
Okay, let me answer before you jump in on this one. Take a deep breath for a minute, Gary. So I want to clear up some confusion out there. When we talk about PDGS, Participant Directed Goods and Services, and things that are still available on all three waivers, like assistive technology and adaptive and equipment supplies and specialized medical equipment and supplies, those are still available.
Yeah, we didn't eliminate anything.
Yeah, I think everyone hears PDGS and they automatically feel like they have to get everything through GT Independence, used to be Morning Sun, but that's not the case. Assistive technology is an electronic type of equipment. So that would be your iPad, your cell phones. What we've recently figured out with CMS in the last year is they will not pay for that monthly bill. Medicaid had never had any intention of paying for that monthly cell phone bill or the internet. Now, it's a little different if you're talking about remote supports too, which is kind of like a home base in someone's home that that person's pretty independent, they just need someone to check in. So that's a different service altogether too.
Waivers.
Does that help answer?
I think
Yeah,
it's
so-
level one and I'm solved.
Right.
Yes.
right. So the federal government says we're not paying for utilities.
Right.
And the internet has been interpreted to be a utility. Some counties will use local dollars to pay for it, but that depends on your county.
Well, so remember this, for 2 years, we, as a system, were authorizing monthly fees through the waivers, and then we got kind of blindsided by CMS saying, no, we never wanted you to do that. So what's happened now is some counties have received some grant funding. I'm again looking at Carolyn, because I think DD Council did some stuff that provided grants for technology. We have to realize as a system, I think, that we're never going to have enough people. I mean, Ohio is really unique. We've got this aging population that's leaving. The people that we've always counted on, kind of in the middle of the road, I would say. I mean, there's just less and less people to provide the service, so we've got to figure out different ways.
Was there any questions over here?
Yes.
Over
Back to
there?
me.
Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to revisit one of the issues you talked about earlier, and that was for the PDP.
Right.
And I could just say, and this is an oxymoron, that as an independent provider, I've opted out of doing the PDP services for a lot of different reasons.
And most people don't know what PDP is because PDP is not a waiver service, it's an agency.
Correct, and that was one of the reasons why. When
Right.
my clients got PDP's waiver, I decided not to because of all the nuances of the paperwork and the cap when you being paid. And as an independent, I felt like I was going into an agency.
Right.
And so my question is, since you're trying to combine the two waivers, as you said,
Right.
is there still going to be a cap on the rates for PDP services?
And we can't use the term PDP because that doesn't mean anything to 95%.
Okay.
So,
The self-directed or
right,
whatever.
there are established rates of pay for independent providers and agencies. So we're gonna talk about the budget in a little bit. Right now, the rate is the rate is the rate. If you're a certified independent or an agency, Boundless and PDP has a totally different structure. It doesn't apply to the established rates. And I can't explain.
Yeah, so Boundless is a certified provider in Ohio who runs what's called a parent-directed program. So it's developed to create a little bit of flexibility, but I think what I'm hearing you say is people opt out of that because you feel like you're already certified with the state, right, as an independent?
No, that was not my question.
Okay.
I didn't mind the certification process,
Okay.
being duplicated and all of that. I didn't mind that, so I went through that, and I didn't have a problem. It was just the pay
Yes.
portion of it.
Yeah, that's-
That I felt that I was losing a lot.
Yeah, this,
In going to, in allowing me to, get some of those clients
Yeah.
that asked me to, that I was losing a lot more than any advantage that I was gaining
Right.
as an independent provider.
yeah, so when they bill the system as an agency provider, they bill X amount per hour.
Correct.
And you're saying you're not happy with the amount they
No,
give
you
you?
don't get overtime, you don't get anything.
Right,
So,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
what's the benefit?
that's on Boundless.
Yes, that's why there's free choice of provider, right? That's why you've opted out and you've said, okay, I don't want to be part of that program.
Right, but I was thinking that since you're trying to combine the two waivers, so you just said,
Yeah.
that maybe that would be one of the changes. I mean,
Not
I
to
don't
Boundless.
mind
No,
providing services for
Yeah,
everyone.
Yeah.
not to Boundless, they're a separate business entity that can run their business how they feel like they need to run it.
Got it. Second question.
Yeah.
Okay, this, $2,500 that you were just addressing.
Right.
How does a parent get access to that?
In your team meeting.
I asked the service coordinators, now
So, okay, I will go back. If you're learning something here today and you ask your service coordinator and they give you a blank look, call us.
Yeah.
If they give you a blank look, that means they've not been trained on it yet.
Okay, and how do we get access to these slides
We'll
or?
put them on our website under resources.
Yeah, so I'll eventually, well, I think Josh will probably do it for us. He'll upload it.
Yeah.
And if you're at the top of the website for the archiveohio.org, there'll be a resource tab. And can click on that and you'll see a conference presentation, stuff like that, so.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll definitely share it with anybody that wants it.
So we have a couple over here. So keep in mind that there are rates, there are rules, and if you're using an agency, they have policy and procedures that they follow that are independent of all of that other. They still have to follow the rates and the rules.
Yeah, I have a two-part question.
Sure.
Back to the technology, they refused a communication device for my son at OSU, but we have an iPad, and he can spell. It's a head injury from a car accident. He's
Right.
the same person inside he was before. The speech therapist told me that because of his insurance, Medicare and Medicaid, it will not pay for. We made an appointment to get his iPad mounted,
Okay.
but they told me I have to private pay. And I'm wondering if there's, I just got off the phone yesterday, and I'm thinking, by the time I pay the therapist and pay the engineering staff, I don't know if this is gonna be hundreds or a couple thousand. Is there any way I can use the system he's on an IL waiver to help pay for that?
Absolutely.
How do I get that done?
In your team meeting. And if your team says, no, we don't do that, call us.
Okay, so I want to, remember what I said a little bit ago, so keep this in mind, a waiver is always a payer of last resort too. So they're gonna ask for things. First off, anytime you go to a team meeting, you talk about services, it's never going to be about wants. So let's be clear, it's about needs, so you gotta identify those needs, and you probably have to get a denial from private insurance, Medicaid, and then the waiver will pay for that equipment.
Right.
How do I get the denial from Medicaid? Is that on my shoulders, or does the SSA?
The SSA should help you get that.
Okay, and I don't have a team, I just have an SSA and myself.
Well, we always say the word team, I'm sorry, it's typically an SSA, a family member, and the person with the disability that are involved in that meeting.
So, call my SSA to start this process.
Yes.
One more question.
Okay.
I'm 76 and it's very hard, I'm starting to look for places for my son to live.
Yeah.
It's devastating,
I know.
it's very frightening, scary. My question is, I'm connecting the dots, and I just don't see where there's enough food budget. Does SNAP go up from $200 a month when the family is out of the picture?
I do not know that.
We don't know for sure. It depends on who's in power.
Meaning the governor, the president, who?
A little bit of all of the above. SNAP.
I don't see how they can even help diet on what's allowed in there.
You're exactly right. It's one of the things to ask all the candidates from the representatives, the senators, the governor, the president, your member of Congress.
It's like they're putting them out, they're done with them, and they don't give them a healthy diet.
One of the hardest concepts for us as loved ones is that we are part of the welfare system. It is what it is. Anything that happens to a poor person happens to a person with a disability because they are technically poor. Medicaid is the Obamacare of the 1960s. It is what it is. It's part of welfare. So it is challenging for us to do systems advocacy to say, we want it for this person, we don't want it for that person. We're all in this together.
But
yes, ma'am.
the other thing that makes it a double whammy is I do have a trust, but the Medicaid trust denies money from the trust going to food and rent.
Check with Community Fund back here. They do trust, they're one of the vendors. They might be able to help you. She's out in the hallway. She's an attorney that specializes in trusts, and she might be able to help you with that.
I have a good opinion.
Okay, all right. Yeah, let's do here, because I'm close, and then we'll go over there. Right.
something I feel like I've gone to a couple of classes on it, wasn't available out there.
Well, switch the end.
Because that's an easy one statewide, it's your SSA, and you have the right to request a different one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I just have a couple of yes or no questions. Is this income-based, the waivers?
So to be on a waiver, you have to be eligible for Medicaid. And Medicaid is income-based, but only for the person on the waiver, not the family.
Okay, so he just, after 18 years, we finally came up with a waiver. He's finally eligible for
Right.
the waiver. And the lady, our rep was telling me that I had to find my own psychiatrist and doctor to,
What county are you in?
Franklin.
Franklin County has those professionals working for the county board.
And
If
this-
your SSA is saying that, ask for their supervisor.
The Franklin County is who's telling me.
Ask for their supervisor.
Okay, and my last question is, does the waiver pay for transportation and mileage for him?
Yes,
Both?
yes,
Not for college. It
yeah,
doesn't pay for college.
it does now.
Oh, it does?
It changed last year. Yeah. So the waiver will not pay for transfer. We've gotten around this a couple times. Waivers shouldn't pay for transportation to go to public school. The waivers will pay for transportation that are gonna make me eligible to be employed, which can be college.
I think she was talking about tuition.
Oh, it won't pay for tuition. I thought you said transportation. Yeah.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah, it'll pay for transportation to go to vocational, college, work. Yeah, and that was just change. Actually, we've got a champion over here that made the change.
The $2,500 cap
Right.
on the PDGS, does that come out of the waiver funding or
Yes.
separate funding?
It's the waiver
So
fund.
it has to be.
So
in
if you're an
there.
adult on the level one, you've got a $45,000 budget. And it all comes out of that budget. And there is nothing above that budget. We know that there are a number of people on the level one waiver that should be on the IO. The system has yet to determine how to deal with that. But half the people on the level one weren't spending half of their budget. So we think it'll be sufficient, but there are gonna be a handful of folks that really should be, and we're using that as justification that you should go up to the IO. Remember, the county board has a legal obligation to protect the health and safety of the people in their county. And I had promised she'd be next. I promised she'd be next.
Sorry, I didn't know
last
that.
Um, did you say that the 2,500 participant directed goods and services is not available in the IO?
No, not yet. Yeah, so.
We're really trying it in the level one first, and then we'll see how that goes, and then hopefully, long-term, we eventually get to one waiver, but that's probably several years
So
away.
we've snickered a little bit about a team meeting. Most of the changes that are happening and we're talking about, we're a smaller group of people, including advocates and families and people with disabilities, who sit in a room and negotiate on, people ask, what gives the ARCA the authority to go in and do it? I say the parents who founded our organization in the 1950s and fought for the right to be there. When our staff say, if someone questions me, what should I say? My response is, tell them you're the ARC, damn it. You know, it is what it is. You know, Jackie knows, you go into a building and you are the advocate, and dare me not to be the advocate.
Yeah.
So.
So I had a concern about the elimination of emergency funds and the
Right.
fact that there's no cap on the adult day program spending. So for the independent provider of
Thank you,
HPC
dear.
services, what I'm seeing in the meeting, is the adult day program providers are approaching the individuals and offering them literally all of the array of services that they can provide, where there's no cap.
There is a cap.
Of course, the people want to, well, the people want to do it. And the problem that we're having is, you know, where someone maybe was going 2 or 3 days a week to day programs because that was all they could do. Now day programs kind of recruiting them for 5 days a week, and then that's going to get into the HBC services. And we may not find out that that is a problem until the end, and if there's no emergency services, what will they do? When
So
they
I'm really glad you brought that up. Remember now on the level 1 in the South, if I'm an adult, I have a $45,000 budget. Day services have to be paid out of that money. What many people are telling us is, I've just spent 2 years not going to a day program, and I don't think I want to go back. If I wanted, there is no cap on homemaker personal care. What many families are telling us is, I now want to use my entire budget on homemaker personal care. I don't want to go to a day program. The Iowa waiver still has 2 budgets, one for a home in the community and one for day. The level 1 in the South don't have 2 budgets or 4. They've got 1 budget. So the example I use, I'm really goofy and nutty. When I go into these negotiation meetings, I say, when I was 16 years old, my mother went to the grocery store where she shopped, and she said, if you want me to continue to be a customer, you're gonna hire Gary tomorrow when he turns 16. My mom got me my job. Your parents, your friends, your uncles, they got you your first jobs. And if I needed help learning how to bag, it would have been my mom coming in to help me. You shouldn't know my mom, yeah. My mom, under this scenario, if I had a disability, could be certified as a homemaker personal care provider. She didn't have to be certified as a job coach. She just needed to know me. So under this new simplification, if the people you're serving, whether you're an independent, or even if you work for an agency, and you help them get a job at Giant Eagle, and you're willing to provide a homemaker personal care provider to help them at Giant Eagle, HBC services are in the home and the community. The other thing to keep in mind, adult services are paid on a ratio, 1 to 4. Homemaker personal care can be 1-on-1, or 2-on-1, or 3-on-1. So if I need 2 people to help me while I'm working at Giant Eagle, I can get it through homemaker personal care. You've got to work the billing codes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think she was.
Oh, yeah. So she'll go for it. Yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to be a line
No.
First, I'm freezing my bubble here. Is there any way
We're rolling around.
Who do you see out here? I see a woman. They're wearing skirts, they're wearing dresses, they're cold here.
Thank you.
Turn the heat up and the AC down a little bit. Okay, now my question.
Thank you for bringing it up.
You're welcome. This is all new to me. I'm not from this area. I talk a little different than the rest of you folks. I apologize.
I used to live in Alabama, and my southern drawl will come out like this.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, boy,
so
okay.
a little different than you. Okay, now, my question. This all sounds real good, but in simple terms, is there a list or somewhere we can go, someone we can talk to? And please, don't tell me, hey, send me an email alone. What I'm talking about is there's somebody that I can talk to if you don't have a prepared list of what we can access with the money, the $45,000. What can I get with that $45,000?
I'm glad you asked that question because, no.
Can you get one?
No.
Why not?
Because this is a common, this is it. We have gone from parents calling saying, I need help, the SSA saying, what do you need? And the parent saying, what do you have? It doesn't work that way anymore. We have to, in addition to this, it doesn't work that way.
Why not?
Because it's based on need. All that we've talked about are billing codes.
Okay.
And the billing codes are broad enough to fulfill needs.
Okay.
So maybe you just need a night out with your wife. that would be homemaker personal care, but you don't need to know the billing code. You just need to know what you need.
Let me be blunt.
Yes.
Please, if I'm rude or seem rude, let me
You're rude.
apologize in advance. I don't need lip service. I need action. I need information.
Right.
Okay? You're telling, yeah, you got $45,000 here, you know, you
Right.
can do this, you can do that. I don't have anything in front of me on paper that tells me, what can I do with this $45,000?
And I know you don't like this answer.
I don't want to talk to ASA, FBI, or whomever. I want to talk to a human. Who would say to me, hey, yeah, you know, you got 45,000, Hector. Here's what we can do with it. Or better yet, here's what you can do with it.
You're not gonna get that from the system. And I'm being direct and blunt with you.
Okay.
These teams, so does your loved one have a waiver?
So what?
Does your loved one have a waiver?
Does my loved one have a waiver?
That's what we've been talking about.
No.
Okay, all right. So the first step is to contact, none of this applies to you if you don't have a waiver.
Okay.
Okay? The first step is, what county do you live in?
Jefferson.
First step, so Kara can help. Kara would be the one to help. The first step is there are 88 counties. You contact your county board of developmental disabilities. So is this your daughter?
No.
No. You have to contact the county board of developmental disabilities in Steubenville, and you have to be able to express a need. It is what it is. Yeah. So my need, if I have someone out of school, is I need my son to do something during the day.
Okay.
You don't have to get, and then with that question, they may say, well, we've got a shoulder workshop, or they may say, well, what do you mean by that? If you say, I want my son to get a job, they may refer you to what's called Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. It's a vocational rehabilitation program in the state of Ohio. They're funded to help people with disabilities get jobs. If it's my family's falling apart and I just need a break, it depends on the questions you ask them, but they're never going to give you a list anymore because that doesn't exist. It used to.
Maybe it should.
Well, because the reason it doesn't exist, it used to be, well, you can go to this building and that building, or you can live with 100 other people. People have told us those aren't the options I want anymore. So it really is that broad.
Every time I have a question about a need, I'm gonna have to reach out to one of these nice
No,
ladies over here.
First establish a relationship with the Jefferson County Board of DD. That's number one. And then you can work with them. Most of them it'll be a back and forth kind of conversation. But they won't tell you what you need. You have to say what you need. So does your loved one have Medicaid or Social Security benefits? Okay. So most adults with developmental disabilities at 18 qualify for something called supplemental security income, which would bring in about $800 in cash a month. They also would qualify typically for Medicaid, which would provide all the health insurance. The Medicaid card does have a list of things they will provide because they're a health insurance company. So they'll say doctors and hospitals and pharmacists. But on the side that's not about medication and medical issues, the burden falls back on the family to say, I need this. And then their job as the county board is to fulfill your need. We're a charity, so we exist to kind of help you with those. It's a dialogue. There's a lot of time I'll just go out with dad and have a beer or a cup of coffee, and we'll talk about, okay, tell me about your kid. And then I help with, this is how you explain your need. There is a formal assessment called a waiting list assessment that the county board goes through with you on different questions they will ask you to help you identify need.
What's your name, Garrett?
Garrett, yes.
Garrett, I got a question.
Sure.
All this sounds nice,
Right.
okay? But I'm trying to be straight here. I'm not looking for a bunch of red tape.
Right.
I'm not looking for lip service. I just want service.
Right.
And that's all I'm looking for.
Right.
Okay?
But you gotta tell me what service it is you want. And we'll go round and round, Hector.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
I've got an hour during lunch, I'll sit with you and we'll talk.
I'll talk to you then.
Okay.
These nice people's time.
No.
Thank you.
We gotta see this, we gotta go, it's been a while.
I would, but understand, I'm on your side.
Oh, no, I'm sure you are.
Right.
But the system isn't.
But you gotta learn how to work it. You gotta learn how to work it. And that's what my job is, to teach you how to work it. Yeah.
Okay, I don't wanna be a line jumper either, like you said. So right there. Gary,
Yes.
just 1 minute.
Right.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the HPC.
Right.
One of the young ladies that live with me in shared living just applied for a job at Giant Eagle.
Right.
I went with her for the interview. So if people don't know that you can really actually do that when they're working with the county board, you can sit, and it kind of helps to navigate any issues that come up that, you know, you really don't want them seeing in order to get this job. And one of the things I just asked the county board, because we weren't able to locate a job coach right away, could I be the person to start this job with her next week? And they said, oh, well, we don't know how we would fund that. Now, you just said that they can fund that in HPC.
But if you're the shared living provider.
Yes.
You can't do both at the same time.
But what do you mean, during the day?
You cannot, shared living is a daily rate.
Yes.
So you can't be the shared living provider and the HPC provider. But because shared living assumes you've got a job or you get a break while the person who's someone else who is an HPC provider could do that.
Could do that for
But you can't provide both at the same time.
Okay. And my other comment, it would be great, but then that means we would have 88 people in here, because we have 88 counties. Wouldn't it be great if we had a representative from every county to come to this yearly?
Well,
You know,
we tried.
you did?
Yeah, well, the last event we held here, we had 500. So it's, part of it is the pandemic. But we have over 18,000 names on our e-list that we advertise this. We reach over 30,000 homes through Facebook, and we advertise this.
Where our conferences are open to anyone.
Yeah, no, I'm talking
Now,
about the
the county
SSA.
boards have an association, OACB, who does training every year for about 500 to 600 SSA managers and directors. Now, the difficulty is, does all that information always trickle down to the boots on the ground, the people that are doing this authorizations? We believe not always. It's complicated in our system. I'm not trying to just make excuses, but I can't make an SSA come. I can invite them, and it's open to them, but if they choose not to show up, that's their right.
So we really need to move on. Let's do this.
I have a question, and it's just to piggyback off of her question. I'm an independent provider,
Right.
and I have a consumer that's staying with me, and right now with emergency pay. So right now, she's receiving HBC hours. I'm not at shared living. It's an issue with her level 1 going over to IO, an emergency IO. So, however though, Giant Eagle going through the interview, approved to be a job coach, but now it can't be done because she's shared living. On an individual,
Okay. All right. And we were talking billing codes.
I understand.
Okay.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Should I move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just a question, because I'm about to go through the same thing.
Right.
When this waiver go over. So, and I'm presented the same situation. So, is it possible that one of the things the SA said, I hope, so we have SAs.
Right.
So, what she said is that on specific days, once a schedule, we'll have enough units, and I can bill on the work days under HPC, And on the days when she's off, it could be shared living, something like that, it could be split.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
No.
Okay.
No, because remember the shared living rule says, if I'm a person on the IO waiver, I'm an adult, I'm over 18, I live with my provider, and my provider provides more than 20% of whatever the allocated hours are, I'm shared living. Now the county has the ability, that 20% can be 20% of a week, a month, a year, it depends on the situation. But no, I don't think you can be shared living Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and homemaker personal care on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That doesn't.
I could, excuse me, I can help both of them with that question. You would actually have to be certified under career development. So if you have an individual living with you for shared living, or if you're doing HBC, if anything related to work, job, coaching, help finding jobs and all that would have to be career development.
Right.
Just remember, when you switch certifications to different things, there's different requirements. Just a thought.
Right. Yes, you actually have to do 30 hours or more, for your certification under those services.
Right.
So I had to step out. I stepped out of the room for a minute, so if you answer this, I apologize. So when are you going to open up the shared living rule?
Okay.
Can you explain exactly what that means, opening up a rule, and what is your timeline for everything you're kind of hoping to do for us?
Okay. How many people are shared living providers or have, so shared living is a service only available under the individual options waiver. So if you have a level 1 to self or you don't have the waiver, this does not apply to you. The rule was written a long time ago. Oh yeah, and it can only be provided for up to 4 adults in one home. Has to be an adult on the IO waiver. It used to be called adult foster care. Because if you weren't from the system, it would look like you were providing foster care, sometimes even to your own son or daughter. It's a 24-hour service and a daily rate. In most cases, I can't even think of a time when it's not, shared living is with an independent contractor. All independent providers are independent contractors. So you would get, even if you work for an agency, you would get a 1099 at the end of the year versus a W-2, okay? It was pooled together as we've got adult foster care using local dollars, and we want to make this a waiver service, okay? We did that, but it was pulled together very quickly. And there are some things in it that neither the county boards or the ARC are comfortable with. It was supposed to be, you're getting paid for Monday. You're getting paid for Monday. The only other options you could do for the individual was send them to a day program or send them to a summer camp. The rest of the time was yours. But there was an assumption that the shared living provider, it was a home. This isn't a group home, it's a home. That the shared living provider could possibly have another job outside the home. The pandemic hit. Most, if not all, day programs were shut down. 19-year-olds that were still in school could be in shared living, but their schools were shut down. So the federal government gave Ohio permission to allow a homemaker personal care provider to come into the home to give the shared living provider a break. Not as an extra set of hands. Some counties are authorizing it as an extra set of hands. They're doing what they think they need to do to help out. But it was to give the shared living provider a break. Everyone in the system that I talked to has embraced that it should continue. And it should continue beyond the pandemic. What the federal government did not say, and what we didn't ask, was, is there a limit on how many extra hours I can get? We know sometimes counties are authorizing as many as 80 additional hours. Some counties are saying we're not doing it at all, but remember, everything you get is what's negotiated in that team meeting with your SSA. What we're doing is the ARC and the County Board Association, because it is our major issues, are negotiating what the maximum should be. Our position going into it is the team should decide how many additional hours. No one's saying there shouldn't be additional hours after the pandemic, but we're in the process of negotiating how many additional hours. We have asked for documentation and been given it by the department of how many are above so many hours. And we want to know how many people could potentially get hurt if this goes away. The director of the department has agreed to open the rule to look at it. We don't have a timeline yet. There's just an agreement that will open the rule. I think what the director is waiting for is the ARC and the County Board Association to come to an agreement before she opens it.
Add to that.
Yes.
Becky, I know one of your concerns is probably around the rate structure in the shared living rule. I want to be clear, if the rule gets opened, there's going to be some work done on it, but remember that whole RFP, request for proposal, the company's going to come in and do all the rate structure and all the system waivers.
Right.
So we open that rule, there'll be changes made, but it won't have to do with the rates.
Yeah, the rates won't, the daily rate won't change until this consultant who's gonna look at all the ways everyone is paid. They're gonna look at the assessment tools. So there is something called an acuity assessment that determines my funding and staff ratios in a day program. There is a developmental disability profile that determines my funding range on the IO waiver. They will look at all the assessment tools and all the rates. Is anyone in the room grandfathered in from, okay, yeah, Kim. So the concern is also that if there's when they created the shared living rule, everyone was paid hourly or every 15 minutes. But I think there were like 300 people. I don't remember the exact, 200? There were 200 people in Ohio when the rule was created that would have been harmed financially from going from an hourly rate to a daily rate. And the rule that is currently in place says we're going to grandfather all of those people in. We're not going to force them to go into shared living. But if anything changes, that grandfather clause goes away. So this woman, potentially, unless we keep that grandfather clause in, if we do what everyone thinks we need to do, will those 200 people be harmed financially?
Okay, so I should have been grandfathered in, but I was never given that option. I'm sorry.
So, yeah.
It's not just a financial hardship, it was the fact that we didn't have any other providers.
Right.
And when OSL came into play, it was actually a combination.
It goes off automatically. I've done that 3 times.
It was a combination of adult family living and adult foster care. And we were given the option at that time, this was back in 2009, to either continue billing hourly adult family living or adult foster care. And so on that date, you had to decide, and once you decided, if you moved off of hourly, because a lot of people were like, yeah, I want the daily rate, I want to be able to do that because it's simple, easy, I don't have a lot of paperwork. Those of us that chose to stay were grandfathered in. When they opened the rule, it was about 2 years ago? Yeah, before the pandemic, they opened the rule. It was during the Martin administration. That clause had disappeared from the rule. I made sure they put it back in.
Right.
The point is that there was 204 families that opted to stay hourly. If that goes away, that is not going to be a hardship necessarily on us. It's going to be a hardship on us being able to get providers, because most of us have complex care, behavior, or medically fragile individuals. My son is complex care and medically fragile. So I really think that that is something, when the rule opens up, because I'm on the waiver work group, but that I'm the voice that's going to say that I think that individuals who have consumers or adult children who are complex care, medically fragile, or have behavior add-ons, or are eligible for those, should be able to go out.
And that's exactly what we've told the county boards. There are people currently, shared living is a one-on-one, one staff to one person, or one staff up to 4 people. We've said exactly what you said, that if I have a complex care add-on, and we're not getting into all of that, but there's assessments to determine what the rate of pay would be. Those people should be exempted from shared living. We've got agreement from the department or the county boards on that.
That's what we
But
fight
that's
for.
what we agree with you, Kim. So you had to be on the IO waiver when this rule took effect. So if you were on the transitions waiver, it does not apply. It doesn't apply. It only applies if you moved from the IO waiver on adult foster care.
So because I was on
Because
TDD
you were on TD, it doesn't apply to you.
and they took it away,
Right.
that sucks.
Pardon me?
2011.
Yeah.
That sucks. That's why I wasn't given the option.
Right, right. So you got screwed.
Okay.
One more question. Are you saying that if you have an add-on, if your loved one has an add-on, they should not be on shared living then?
Well, that's our proposal.
That's your proposal, it's not a.
That's what we're
Thank
fighting
you.
for. We believe, because we know there are counties authorizing 2-on-1 staff, just because it's the right thing to do, but it violates the rule. And we're saying this is a protection for the county boards and what people with disabilities need. So but again, this is all negotiated. We don't represent independents, but what we tell people is most independents are family members. You know, and we do represent the people you support.
Take a break, Gary.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I do want to say one more thing.
Okay.
Okay, so we were going to talk about the budget, but I want to talk to you about, you've heard about the 6.5% retention payment that is out there. That is working its way through the system. Even though it's been approved on many levels that as of April 1st, if you're still a provider, independent, or an agency, after 3 months, that you will receive 6.5% of what you billed during those previous 3 months. It takes a while to get things through the system.
And it's different for, reporting wise, it's different for agencies versus independents.
Right. So with independents, you don't have to do anything. We expect the payment to come the first or second week in December. It could come sooner, and it will be 6.5% of whatever you bill the state. It's optional for agencies to participate. So if you work for an agency, you may get a retention bonus in cash, you may get a benefit, you may get extra time off. It's up to the agency to determine what they do with that 6.5%. But 82% of whatever they...
At least 82% of that has to be passed on. And the reason, the logic behind that is, when you look at how the Medicaid rate structure is done, there's an 18% administrative rate kind of built into those. So they're allowing an agency to say at least 82% has to be passed on directly to the care workers. So that's a retention. Don't use the word bonus. We got in trouble for saying bonus before, right? It's a retention payment.
So if you stop being an independent provider before it comes out, you don't get the money.
Okay.
You know, so keep your certification active in your
Or
billing
if we
app.
switch agencies.
If
Agency
agencies
to
are voluntary.
agency, yeah.
If you work for ABC Corporation and you switch to another, it's agency specific. You left your retention bonus.
If I, as an agency, don't want to play a part in that, I just don't opt in. So I think it would be wise if I did for my staff, right? All right, so you take a deep breath. We're done, right? Yeah, we're done. We're done. Asking questions is great. Okay, so there are a buffet table back there.